Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. Welcome to this webinar. Today, we'll be talking about TagoCore, right? Using edge computing, correct? For those who don't know me, my name is Marcelo. I am Tago's content editor, and with me today, I have Matthew, one of TagoCore developers, and Fabio Lima, Tago's CEO and founder. Before we start, please feel free to present yourself on our chat, and if you have any questions, we have just opened our Q&A that is located above the chat, so you guys can ask your questions. At the end of the presentation, we will have a moment to answer the right. So just a quick reminder, we are constantly having webinars, so if you don't want to miss them, please visit our events page. There you can see our schedule, right? So talking about schedule, let's start with our schedule for today. First, Fabio Rosa will go through TagoCore benefits and why you should use the platform. After that, we will see TagoCore architecture and its feature. Uh, and finally, a live demo with Matthew. And then we'll have our Q&A to answer the questions, right? So without further ado, please, Fabio.
Thank you very much, Marcelo. It's great to be here to talk again about TagoCore. We have been doing a lot of work from our side here. I'm very glad to share something new that we are adding in our platform. Thank you again for everybody who could join us today. Feel free again to introduce in the chat and let's move on. So first, just a couple of minutes, I'm going to talk about TagoCore benefits, just a couple of slides. Then, in my view, the most important part will be when Matt come here and talk about and introduce again the TagoCore in a demo, and also talk about the plugins, the things that we're doing. Okay, first thing is just good to share again why we're doing it, what's important, right? So when you talk about cloud, like Tago.io has been working for many years, deploy solution in the cloud, you see a lot of advantage because you have the device that sends the data go to the cloud. But there are some challenges. For example, one of the challenge, depending on the application, is latency. There are a little bit of delay, of course, to reach the cloud, the process, and send it back. There are costs related to the connectivity, and sometimes concerned about security, privacy. But why use the cloud? There are some reasons, of course. One is very easy to scale, right? Does not mean that there is not cost for that, but it's easy to scale, and also it's a centralized lifecycle management. But it means that if there is a problem, you can fix quickly and monitor your product, your solution quickly. So what's the proposal of TagoCore? So a key proposal of TagoCore, besides the fact that it can run on the edge, of course, but also can run on the cloud, is that it will extend the capability of the cloud. That's the key things we're bringing. So you can create your intelligence on the cloud and also add intelligence more locally on the edge. So moving the intelligence close to the edge. By edge, you mean where the things are happening, close to the sensors that send the data or actuators that are getting data. So you can reduce the latency for real-time application, getting this very close to zero or just few milliseconds. Of course, depending on the computer power that you have there. You can increase reliability. Of course, you're not going to rely all the time with on the connectivity, network, and so on. And you can add more intelligence locally. And we believe, again, that's very important to combine both. Let me show you here very quick how you can combine TagoCore that's run on the edge with a cloud computing solution. So with that, you can, for example, reduce the latency, increase the stability and availability. So let me show you just one example here. When you do something applied to industrial application like the IIoT. In this example, you can see here on the left side down, you have the sensor. Let's say that you have these sensors connect in your manufacturer line, one site, let's call site one. So you can have a combination of a sensor send data to, in this case, can be a Raspberry Pi or any computer, frankly, that you install TagoCore there, that you can store the data locally, that can be massive data that you store locally. You can process this data. You can have, for example, MQTT, broker, everything locally. And you can have different types of a protocol because TagoCore, we're going to see in 1 minute exactly the architecture, can combine this data, run for you, and can send this to the cloud, but not all the data. If you don't have it, you can send it just the most important data, those for those that will be following your application. Okay, so you can send this data to Tago.io, for example. Well, Matt's going to show you how to do that. You can build it there on Tago.io on the cloud. Your algorithms very high level. You can generate the reports. You can aggregate the data, and then because Tago.io is already connected with a Tago Run internally, you can define the visualization, how we're going to show this data to your users. That's interesting because Run combined with the rest of the system can give you easy way to grant access to different levels. For example, you can show data to the super admin. You can get another vision for the supervisors from one side, for example, site 1, site 2, and so on. So what you can see on the right is real dashboards that you can visualize remotely from anywhere. It doesn't mean that you cannot visualize the data locally. Okay, so with TagoCore, you can add plugins that can combine the data from the local database for BIs, for example. Okay. Other thing that's very interesting is that we rely a lot on plugins. So that's something that TagoCore has since the beginning of the concept. So some of the hardware that we already work are those listed here, but you can install TagoCore in basically any Linux, Windows, you can install it on your Mac computer or even the cloud. Okay, so if you're wondering how you can get this, you can see this example here, hardware from Siemens or Aeon or even Dragino that combine the LoRa with other hardware. You can install them and run locally. So we're extending the number of plugins so that you can also select the database. So we know that as you expand, you may find that one type of a database can be better than other. For example, you can use SQLite, or you may need MongoDB or Postgres in a different kind of a database. Also, we have created plugins for MQTT or LoRaWAN connectors. And what's very interesting, and I'm pretty sure Matt's going to talk about that, is that we are not only going to talk about get these plugins for database, but also you can get this and create your own plugin for your complete application if you want. Now, I want to move here up to the architecture side. So one thing that I want to highlight is that at the end of the day, TagoCore is very similar to the Tago.io architecture. So you can connect your device, send it to the TagoCore, do the magic that I'm going to talk here in details, Matt is going to explain, and then you can process everything locally in a very similar way that you can do when you run things on Tago.io. So a lot of people know Tago.io, they want to run the scripts, report, and so on. You can do this also locally using TagoCore. And again, just remember, TagoCore is open source, is a free version that you can install. There is no loyalties or anything like that, so you can run locally. Now I want to go a little bit in details here and explain out this part for you. And for that, I want to transfer here to Matt, so Matt can start and talk about this and then go to the demo. Matt?
Thank you, Fabio. Thank you so much. I'm just going to be sharing my screen here. There we go. Okay, so we're just going to pick up where Fabio stopped. So this is the architecture of TagoCore. We're going to be covering a bunch of stuff during this live demo and architectural sort of understanding here. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about the architecture. Then we're going to go to the actual live demo, and I'm going to show the new features of TagoCore. We're also going to show how to do the basic features of TagoCore. So both the new features and the old ones, just so everybody understands the context. And then we're gonna also talk about Q plugins, which is a new feature that we developed, and also the publish plugin CLI, which is really interesting. So first, this is the architecture diagram. We can see right here that the device on the left side is sending a request to our TagoCore API. Now, this is the actual server of TagoCore. So when you install TagoCore in your machine, um, this TagoCore binary opens up an HTTP server, which allows devices to send requests to the server. Once a request is identified by the server, what happens is it sort of first it authenticates the devices, clients, and metadata. So the very first request to the database plugin, as you guys can see. Then what it does, so right here, the TagoCore sort of talks with the database plugin to authenticate the devices, clients, and metadata. And then once it has everything authenticated, the TagoCore API will pass that data that the device sent to our encoder plugin, right? And this, what it does is basically, if you have an encoder plugin associated with that particular device, it's gonna sort of transform the data based on the criteria of the encoder plugin. Of course, if you don't have an encoder plugin, nothing will happen. It will sort of just skip this step, right? And then what it does is after this encoder plugin is sort of transformed or sort of transforms the data, it passes the data to the payload parser. So that's the next step, right? Payload parser is just another way for you to transform the data without having to use any plugins. And then this is the important thing, guys. The payload parser, what it does is once it transforms the data, just like the encoder plugin, it sends this data to our Q plugin, right? And this is the new feature. Our main goal here was to develop a system that would improve the way that we insert data into the database, right? So in older versions of TagoCore, such as 0.6, for instance, whenever we sent data to TagoCore, what it would happen is this data would get instantly added into the database. Now, this is good because it's fast, but if you are sending a bunch of data, it can sort of be very demanding to the database and the database plugin. So our goal here was to create a system where we could send as much data as we wanted, and we would not overheat, so to speak, the database plugin or the database, right? It would keep the CPU and memory consistent for the database without overloading it. And so this is the Q plugin. This is how it works. Now, if you don't have a Q plugin associated with your TagoCore, you can sort of skip this step, right? So if you don't have a Q plugin associated, it would sort of just go to the data orchestrator right here. It would skip this step. I think my camera is in the way, but right here where my mouse is, it would skip this step and go to the data orchestrator, right? But that's not really our goal. We're going to use the Q plugin because I want to show in details how everything works, right? And then once it hits the data orchestrator, then we sort of spread the data and we send it to our TagoCore integration, as Fabio has mentioned. And then we also send it to actions, analysis, real-time statistics in our homepage. And of course, we also store the data right here in our database plugin. And of course, the data orchestrator also needs some additional information from the database. Now, keep in mind, guys, that this is not the full architecture of TagoCore because TagoCore is honestly pretty huge. So, for instance, we don't include the ability for you to create custom HTTP server or custom servers such as MQTT. So, our MQTT plugin sort of doesn't fit this narrative in the sense of this part right here, because this device is sending HTTP data. If we want to receive data from MQTT, it's not HTTP, it's a different protocol, right? So we didn't include that particular scenario, but once it hits our API, everything is the same. It's just that some things outside of our sort of little square here or scope, we didn't include it. All right, just want to make sure that everybody understands that it's not that TagoCore is tiny like this. Okay, awesome. Now we're actually going to go to the live demo. I hope everybody understood this little schematic here, this little diagram. If not, feel free to talk to me in the audience. Okay, so let's go to the live demo. Now, as I have mentioned, first we're going to cover some basic stuff for TagoCore, just because I know some people here have never um, have never used TagoCore in depth, at least, right? So I think it's important that we cover those bases. First of all, here I have TagoCore installed in my local Mac machine. You could install TagoCore, as Fabio has mentioned, in a Raspberry Pi, any sort of Linux machine, Windows, Mac, doesn't really matter. We support pretty much every machine out there. But just because I'm on a Mac and it's easier for me, I've installed it here in my Mac. And then right here on the left side, we have a couple of buttons, right? And this, for those of you who sort of have some experience with Tago.io know that this is very familiar. It's a very, very familiar setting. We have the devices, which are the digital representations of your physical devices. So if you want to send data from a device, it's a good idea for you to come over to this specific part and register your device right here. And then we also have the buckets where the device data is stored. So whenever you register a device, this device will send data to a particular bucket. And it's a one-to-one relationship. So every time that you have a device, you also have a bucket. It's always one-to-one. In this case, I don't have any buckets simply because I don't have any devices. But we are going to be creating a new device soon. And I'm going to go to the buckets page just to show you guys how it works. And then we also have analysis. Analysis are sort of scripts or code that you can implement to run whenever you'd like. So for instance, you could program your application to run an analysis every time your device sends data. You could do that. Or you could maybe program the analysis to be run every minute or every 10 hours. It's up to you. But basically, you create a piece of code, a block of code, and it can be a big block of code. It doesn't have to be tiny. There's no limit, really. You can use whatever language you want. So Go, Python, Node, really, whatever you prefer. And then you can trigger this analysis to run whenever you'd like. And actions is actually what makes the analysis trigger. So you cannot make an analysis trigger by itself unless you're actually pressing run manually. When you want to automate your analysis, what you do is you create an action, because actions are sort of event listeners, right? So when you want to listen to an event and perform a corresponding action, the name, I think, sort of makes sense, because then you create an action, right? I'm not going to go into details on how to create that sort of stuff, because we cover them so many times in so many webinars. So make sure you check them out if you're more interested in those topics. But for now, I just want to sort of glide past that and look at our new features, right? Okay, so these are the basic features. Let's go to the new ones. So if I go to the store right here, you guys can see that we have a new plugin right here on the top called Amazon SQS. And this is part of our queue plugin initiative, right? The ability that you can create your very own custom queues based on existing queue platforms out there. So if you guys remember our architecture, on the right side, there was a little queue, right? Which I actually hovered over it. And that queue is not sort of native to TagoCore, in the sense that there isn't a simple queue in which you can integrate TagoCore. You need to install a plugin, and that plugin, we use a different queue platform out there. So in this case, what we're going to do is we're going to use the Amazon SQS queue. I think the name, I think it was a bit redundant there, because SQS is Simple Queue Service. And what this does is it's basically a queue implementation of AWS. So this is the type of queue that they recommend whenever you want to implement any sort of generic queue. So it could work for TagoCore, and it could work for many other types of application. And we're using it for TagoCore here. Now, we also have developed a RabbitMQ queue, and it's going to be released very soon. Actually, I was pretty sure that it was already released, but apparently it isn't. So by the end of this presentation, I'm sure that we're going to have a Rabbit MQ right here on this slide. So we and basically what I'm trying to say is we are offering two types of queues in which you can install and use it however you'd like. But basically their functionality is they are going to be improving the way that data gets inserted into the database, right? Now, a couple of things that I think it's important to mention. The queue functionality is good if you are using an external database, but it's not that good if you are using SQLite, for instance, because the whole purpose of a queue is to make sure that you are not overwhelming your database server. And when you're using the SQLite database right here, in this case, I actually am, it's not that ideal because SQLite is extremely fast, and putting the data into a queue and then pulling that queue to insert data into SQLite is not that efficient. So if you guys are using SQLite, I actually don't recommend a queue. Of course, you can try it on your own hardware, and maybe that is better, right? But personally, from my tests and from the tests of our engineers here, it's not really that recommended for such a fast database plugin and database system because it's a local file. You don't have to do any sort of external connections, and it's very, very fast. If you have a very fast MySQL, you may also not need a queue plugin, right? And it's up to you to sort of test that and understand if it makes sense for your application or not. Now, in this case, I have already installed a queue plugin, the Amazon SQS, as I have mentioned. So we're just going to go over to the settings and understand everything that's going on. These are the settings of our SQS plugin. So what we have here on the right side is we have a queue running message, and it says messages on queue equals 0. So we don't have any messages right now, which means that our devices have not sent any data to our TagoCore application. Okay, that's basically it. And then we also have the module status, which is started because we have configured everything in this module correctly. We also have a get credentials from. This is basically where you want to get the SQS credentials from. So AWS by default sort of prevents public access, right, to your sort of different services. So if you want to have access to a queue, you first need to have the queue URL, right? And then you also need the AWS access key ID and AWS secret access key. And without those, you're not going to be able to access the queue. Alternatively, if you don't want to put those credentials manually right here, you can use a from environment. And what this does is it's going to grab those credentials from the environment variables of your machine. If you don't have them there, then of course it's not going to work, right? Okay, so these are the credentials. I think it's pretty straightforward the way it works. And then we also have the queue URL. And of course, this is just a link that identifies where this queue is located. It's not much more than that. We also have a region, which is the AWS region where this queue is located. In my case, as you can see right here, is on US East 1. We also have a batch size, which is the amount of messages it's going to get per consumer, right? And we have the number of consumers per node. And we also have a pooling rate if you want to sort of slow down the pooling of the queue. In certain scenarios, it's interesting that you actually implement a pooling rate, but of course, it depends so much on the hardware and the amount of data that you are trying to insert in your database. So this, I think, is more. It's ideal if you make your own tests and identify if you need the pooling rate or if your application is functioning fine without a pooling rate. Right. Same thing goes to the number of consumers and batch size. And if you want more information about any of these fields right here, check out the left side because we have a ton of information on how everything works with examples and that sort of stuff. Right. Okay, but with all that said, my queue here, my queue plugin is configured. There is one more step that we need to achieve in order to make sure that TagoCore uses this little guy right here as the main queue plugin. So we're going to go to the settings right here. And as you can see on the right side, we have a new configuration called queue plugin, right? This is basically this. It's basically a replica of the database plugin in the sense that here we associate which plugin we want to define as the main plugin for this specific category. So right now we are defining the main database plugin as SQLite. This is pretty easy to understand, easy to figure out. And then we are associating the main queue plugin as Amazon SQS or AWS SQS, whatever you prefer. And we also have another one for file system, but we covered that, so let's just not waste time here. As you can see, we only have one queue plugin because we only have one queue plugin installed, right? And if you don't want to use queue in TagoCore, simply select none. So there we go. And if you want to use a queue or Amazon SQS or RabbitMQ, as I have mentioned, make sure you just click the drop down and select your queue. But I have configured Amazon SQS, as you guys can see right here. I can't even save because it didn't change anything. And so right now is the time where we actually perform some tests, okay? What we're gonna do here is we're gonna send a bunch of data to this queue plugin, and it's gonna pass through the queue plugin and get inserted into our SQLite database. Pretty straightforward, and you're not gonna see much difference, to be quite frank up ahead, because queues are designed to be seamless to the default behavior of TagoCore. We don't want people to sort of get a difference of behavior when they are using a queue, because it's supposed to be a seamless alternative to just inserting data into the database. So all plugins that insert data manually uh, are going to work. And if you send a HTTP request, it's going to pass through the queue plugin as well. You're not going to notice any difference, beside the fact that maybe when you are watching the screen, you may see messages on queue 1 or 2, depending on how fast you can see the messages here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the store. As I have mentioned, our goal here is to simply install our freezer simulator plugin and send a bunch of data to our database with the Amazon SQS queue plugin associated on our TagoCore. We're going to install this plugin right here. There we go. Now I'm going to go to devices. I'm going to create a new device, and let's just put freezer simulator right here. There we go. For the data retention, we don't need that much retention, so 1 day is fine. Now I have created my device. I'm just going to go to more, copy the device token right here, go to our freezer, and as you can see, it has an error. That's normal, guys, simply because we have not set the default configurations for this guy right here. So what we're going to do is paste the device ID, select the freezer type, the temperature unit, and the update frequency. This is all default, guys, nothing fancy here. And if you guys are feeling lost, make sure you take a look on the left side in your own TagoCore. And we're just going to hit save, right? Now let's just refresh for this little error bubble to go. Yeah, there we go. Awesome. So as you can see right here, if we go to our devices, we can see that the last input for this device is 2 seconds ago, which means that our freezer simulator is actually working correctly because it's sending data every 5 or so seconds. We're going to enter this little freezer simulator, go to Live Inspector, and press play because we want to see the data coming in this device. And as you can see right here, we have received a piece of data already, and it's going to receive one every 5 seconds. As you can see, 25 seconds, another one 30, and 35 right here. So it's pretty consistent. As you can see right here, there isn't much in the Live Inspector for you to identify if it is belonging to a queue plugin or not. But rest assured, guys, this is running through a queue plugin or Amazon SQS. And the way I make this assessment to you guys is simply because the SQS queue is associated here. If I disassociate this plugin, it means that all data of TagoCore is simply being sent to TagoCore, the main TagoCore API, and getting inserted immediately in our SQLite database. Now, as you can see, if I go to my Amazon SQS, we can see messages on queue. And the reason for that is because it is so fast that it doesn't have time to update on this page right here. If you have many data points, and I'm talking a lot of them, so let's say we are sending maybe 2,000 data points per second or something crazy like that, or maybe even less or more, doesn't really matter. Then the queue plugin may implement some sort of pooling, and it's going to grab maybe 100 at a time, but it runs very fast, and you may be able to catch it decreasing. So if you are, let's say, sending 2,000 data points per second, you may be able to see 1.5K, and then 1.2K, 1.1, and then 900, 800. But it's very fast. And since we are only sending 2 to 3 data points every 5 seconds, the queue doesn't even begin to doesn't even cover here because it's so fast. Once it hits the queue processes and it inserts into the database. So I hope I was clear. It is running through the queue plugin, but it's so fast because of SQLite and because the amount of data that we can't even see it. Right? Okay, guys. Yeah, so that's it for our queue plugin. I hope everybody understood it, and we're gonna be releasing the Rabbit MQ plugin very soon at the end of the presentation, Max. So yeah, there we go. Now, what we want to cover is the publish plugin CLI. Now, this is something that I'm really excited to be showing you guys, and it's not going to take long. We have about 15 minutes here, so it should be a lot of time for us to cover this. Basically, our second feature that we want to show here is the ability for you to insert plugins, or not insert, publish plugins in our TagoCore store, right? Before I go to this page, which I just jumped right into it, our store right here is public, right? And as you can see, RabbitMQ is already published. So the guys at TagoCore are watching this presentation and they can see that it is right here. So thank you guys. There we go. And of course, everybody that's watching, feel free to install it. That's awesome. Okay, now as you can see, this little store right here that we have is public in the sense that you can build your very own plugins, as Fabio has mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, and you can publish them without any cost, and you can make them public for everyone to install and use whenever they desire. With that information in mind, the only way for you to actually publish plugins up until the last TagoCore versions was through our website. So you would have to go to our TagoCore.com right here, and then log in to your Tago.io account. Go over to My Plugins right here, and then you would have to publish your plugin, right? So that was the way in which you could publish plugins for everyone in the world to see. But it isn't a very ideal scenario in the sense that that only works because you are doing it manually. If you want to automate your plugin to release new versions whenever you want, really, you can't because it's a web page and we don't provide an API for you to a public API or SDK or CLI for you to publish your plugins. That all changes now. So we're gonna review to you guys our new CLI, which allows you to automate your plugins publish process, right? And for that, I have prepared already a little demo right here. Just gonna clear the terminal. There we go. Okay, so what I have here, guys, is VS Code. For those of you who aren't familiar, I zoomed in so everybody can see it very well. And I have a very basic plugin. I hope everybody can still see me because VS Code is very, very dark right now. But what we have here, guys, is a very simple plugin, okay? This plugin only has a single module, doesn't have that much capabilities, only has a single file index, and the icon is a very simple icon from Font Awesome, okay? What we're gonna do is we're gonna publish this plugin privately into the store, and we're not gonna make this plugin public because if this plugin was public, it would mean that everyone in the world would be able to access TagoCore and download it, and we don't want people downloading this plugin because it doesn't do anything. It's just cluttering the store, right? But I do want to show you the process of logging into our CLI and actually publishing this plugin, okay? Now, keep in mind, guys, that this demonstration will use the Tago.io TagoCore SDK version 0.7.0. It is not published yet, okay, guys? But it will be published very soon by the end of this presentation, I'm sure, or maximum until tomorrow. We're just sort of finishing up the details, and this is the main SDK for the new version of TagoCore. Okay, so you need to use this little package right here for you to have access to the published CLI. Once you have installed this version or superior, then you have access to the TagoCore plugin CLI. Let me just increase the height. There we go. The TagoCore plugin CLI is a binary that comes along with our default SDK, which allows you to do a lot of things regarding plugins. So you can pack the plugins, you can publish them, you can log into your TagoCore account and make sure that you can disable, enable plugins into the store. It's a very complex and very rich system. And we're also going to be improving it, of course, a lot in the upcoming weeks. I'm going to run you through the process of how it is that you can publish your plugin. So first of all, you need to log in to this little fella right here. What we're going to do is we're going to type TagoCore plugin, and then we're going to type login. As you can see, it's asking for my email, and that's fine. Let me just put my webinar email right here. There we go. Now it's asking for my password. That's fine. Just make sure I'm not revealing my password. There we go. As you can see, I am logged in as Matt Benacchio, which is my last name. Now, this is my account on Tago.io. Now, it is not my official account. This is just another account that I created for we to understand how it all works. And if I type now TagoCore plugin, who am I, which is a very basic command in a lot of CLIs, we can see that it shows the account of Tago.io where I'm logged in. Okay, so that's step one when you want to publish. Now, what we want to do is we simply want to publish this plugin, and it's very easy. All we have to do is type TagoCore plugin, publish, and I already have right here a command prepared, right? Now, this publish right here, what it does is it will basically create a package of your project, okay? And then it's gonna upload that package to our plugin store servers. That's pretty much it, guys. If you wanna take a look in depth on how it all works, make sure that you check out our open source repository of TagoCore. There you can see our PR and you can see all the code that went into creating this awesome CLI. But I'm not going to be covering the technical aspects of how it works. Okay. Now, as you can see, besides just putting publish, we need to pass a couple of parameters. We need to pass it first, the publisher right here, and the ID of the publisher. Now, when you logged in right here, you associated an account with this CLI. Okay. Now, this account is not a profile. You guys need to understand that. So when we want to publish something, we want to publish the plugin into a certain profile. We already have the account right here. Now we also want to know in which profile you are publishing this plugin. And the reason for that you need to specify it like that, the ID, is because our idea of profiles is very similar to teams in the sense that a profile could be a team. So you could have access to a lot of profiles, which in turn could be a lot of teams, and you can publish different plugins into different teams. Okay, so this is why you need to specify to which team or profile you want to publish. Now, this ID is very easy to acquire. If you just go to your Tago.io profile right here, and let me just go to the home so I can show you guys. If you just click here and then click on profiles right here, you can just copy this ID, and this is the main profile of your Tago.io account. So if I just copy this and go to my VS Code and just delete this and paste it right here, I can simply press enter, and it's gonna publish my plugin. One thing that I did forget to mention though, I'm sorry, is that I passed a -v parameter. Now what this does is it's gonna set the visibility of this plugin as false, which means that it's not gonna be visible to the public in the TagoCore store. If you want this plugin to be visible, you can simply not pass this little flag, or you can pass it as true. And V stands for visibility. Okay. I'm going to show you how it all works. Now, as you can see, it validated my authentication of my Tago.io account, validated my publisher ID, which is right here. It packaged my whole application, my whole project, and then it uploaded my plugin. And if we actually go to the TagoCore Store, we should be able to see it running right here. So if I just refresh the page, there we go. Our plugin is right here. Now, this plugin, it's not ideal because it says fake plugin, but of course, this is just an example, right, guys? And as you can see, it's not visible because we set that little -v flag as false. So even if we access our store right here, if I just refresh the page on TagoCore, There we go. Let's just wait a little bit. You can see that it is not here. You can search it, but you're not going to find it, simply because we have not set it as a visible plugin. So only we, as the plugin publishers, are able to see it right here. But even as plugin publishers, we are not able to see it in the store. We are only able to see it right here in our management sort of page, right? Yeah, and that's pretty much it, guys. It's so easy to use. All you have to do is log in, and you can publish your plugin, and that's pretty much it. I do have a couple of things that I would like to mention, but I do want to make room for questions. So I'm just gonna pass the scene now to Marcelo, and I'm pretty sure some people here have. I'm just stop sharing my screen here, and I'm pretty sure some people have some questions. So Marcelo,
Yes, amazing presentation, Matthew and Fabio.
thank you.
Thank you for it. It's always good to see new TagoCore features, right? And here, before we jump to the questions, it would be amazing to see you all on our next webinar, right? So once again, you can follow our webinars at tagoio.events page, and you can also subscribe to our newsletter, right? There you always notice when we are having a new webinar, and you will follow the IoT word. Right, we already have some questions here, but please don't be afraid to send additional questions. We are here to help you. Okay, so first of all, is there any prediction for a version 1 of, for the official release of TagoCore, Matthew?
Oh, great question, man. Yeah, so we don't have a very precise prediction just yet. We are constantly improving TagoCore, and when we actually release version 1.0, we want to make sure that it is completely ready in the sense that we don't want to sort of backtrack and change a lot of features, because the current scenario with TagoCore is we're just having so many ideas and people want so many things that we are just constantly pumping out features, and we don't want these features to sort of slow us down in the future. So it is going to be very soon. I guarantee you that. But sadly, I cannot give you an exact date on when it's going to be.
Okay, thank you. And another question here, is there support for Kafka, Redis, and others?
Great question as well. Right now, the only queue plugins that we support are RabbitMQ and SQS. But with that information in mind, we are planning on adding a bunch of queue plugins in the future. So some of those may be included in our list. Sadly, we don't have, again, a precise date on when they're going to be developed. So if you want these sort of plugins to be developed, make sure you post it in our community and request them, because then it makes us know that you actually want them and really need them.
Okay, thank you. And finally, we have a question about Tagoyo Polo t-shirt. Right, it's good to know that people are interested in that. Okay, and we see what we can do. Maybe a giveaway, right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, people has interest in that. So you need to do a better job there. So thank you for asking.
And
Good. So
guys,
yeah, that's
please,
it.
Fabio.
Sorry, just take a look here. Really, I can see people getting more engaged. We want to make sure that that's a solid solution. That's what Matt said before, right? We are very eager to get and have the production release, but one thing we want to make sure is that it be always compatible with the previous version, and that's a key differentiation between the where we are today with the beta versus the production. But as Matt said, we are really aiming to have this as soon as possible. What I would say, I don't think it's going to happen this year, but to have companies already work on that, very specific, so we are working with them. So that's very important, and I'll always be very glad to hear from you at help.tago.io, where you have our community, so that you can make suggestions there, ask. We really encourage people to ask for features or things that you think that's relevant, or mention about the issues that you may find. Sometimes it's related to us, sometimes related to something else. So we want to help through our community as well. So make sure you raise your voice there. That's it.
Okay, That's nice. So if you guys don't have any other questions, I would like to remind that this webinar is being recorded. So if you missed any part of it or just want to rewatch it, we'll send you guys the link for it, right? And it will be available on our Vimeo account and on YouTube. So that's it for today. Once again, thank you, Fabio. Thank you, Matthew, and thank everyone for joining us. Right? I hope we see each other on the next webinar. Bye, guys.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.